Alrighty, so next up is me. This is actually a presentation that was put together by Glenn Fountain, who led the overall longevity study where Clay focused on reliability and the analysis part itself. Glenn's not able to join us today, and so I'm going to be presenting on the Interstellar Probe risks as a, next slide, please. A couple of quick notes. Every mission's got its unique set of risks. We heard from Dreisman yesterday talking about Parker Solar Probe. I love the duality of the statement, oh my, we're being hit by hypervelocity dust particles, where the engineers would say that and be discouraged or afraid or point it out as a risk, whereas the scientists are like, woohoo, this is fantastic. So sometimes these things depend on your point of view, but we really tried to understand what the unique risks were for Interstellar Probe, and this pragmatic design concept reduces the overall developmental risks. And so while we do not think that getting through phase A through D is a low risk effort, we do believe that they are within the normal types of risks that a mission would encounter and not really a part of the unique set for this mission. It's the 50-year part that makes this one challenging. So developmental risks are primarily technical, but the study risk analysis really looks at that long duration part. We don't have a project plan per se, and in the formalism of NASA program management, we really can't put together a schedule risk set yet, because we can't say that, oh well, the Star 48 engine is going to show up 6 months into our reserve and not be able to allow us to launch stack the launch vehicle on time if we use up all that reserve and so forth. So we don't have schedule risks in here per se. That's something that'll have to come later. And cost risks, you saw Kathy's presentation earlier on that topic. Next slide, please. So quick look at definitions here. I am not going to go through these. This is inherited from the New Horizons program, which in so many ways is a good analog to what we're doing here. We've got RPS involved, we've got a high-speed launch, we've got a long-duration mission, knowledge management and retention, operation in the outer solar system and beyond. So the way that these are crafted really spoke to us and allowed us to have good discussions about what we mean when we say, hey, I think there's a risk there. And for those of you who aren't familiar necessarily with the formal risk management process at NASA, it really goes like this. We identify a threat, and then we identify what we believe the likelihood is that we realize the effect of that threat, and we combine those together and we say, this is the risk. So the risk is a combination of the threat and the probability that it occurs. And these definitions of cost, schedule, and technical impact are a way for us to give a number, if you will, to where we rank this risk. Next slide, please. And so what you see here is just the probability breakdown for on the left-hand column there, very high down to very low, and then the definitions on the previous slide of minimal to unacceptable risks. Next slide, please. These are our top 10 risks. On the slides that follow, you'll find an expansion on each of these. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail. I'm going to walk through them here in brief, and would instead recommend that you go to the website if you'd like, and find the slides that are there and read about them. And if you have questions during the next 10 minutes or so, create questions based on the details there. So parts reliability risk. You saw Clay's presentation on how we're going about analyzing the next slide, please. You saw Clay's presentation. If we can't, if there are latent defects in the parts, then it's not going to get to end of mission. And where are we going to land up? And you can see that this is R1 is over there on the high consequence, but we believe based on all the analysis that it's a relatively low risk because of the data that we're basing our assessment on, all the reliability stuff that Clay and company have been working on. And this physics of failure part, that is where we believe that we can base our assumption, our assessment on, not assumption, assessment. Next slide, please. Process conflict. There are so many parts of the NASA system that say, missions are 10 years or 15 years or even 20 years. but 50 years is outside of that discussion. And so we believe that we need to do a lot of work to bring the community, NASA, the scientists, the engineers into focus, saying that this can be a thing. One quick example there is that the radioisotope power systems, when they are discussed in the announcement of opportunity for a mission like a New Frontiers mission, they might say, assume that or your guidelines for proposing the mission are that you have to reach end of mission within 17 years of the radioisotope power system being fueled. That's a programmatic number. That's a number that is not actually based on the physics of the RTG itself, but that is a number that sticks in the head of a lot of people. 17 years is how long an RPS lasts? No, that's not true. If you look at the actual duration and operation of these, it's quite a bit longer, as you just heard. Next slide, please. Launch vehicle performance. If we can't get a rocket that can send us off at these speeds, it changes the profile of the mission. That's outside the control of this program. But this is definitely something that we're keeping an eye on. Next slide. Subsystems from vendors not meeting requirements. If you go to, say, an inertial measurement unit company and say, hi, we'd like to buy your IMU and put it on a spacecraft and it has to last for 50 years, they might say, no, thank you. And that's another area where we believe that we have to manage this risk, manage the subcontractors, and get to a place where we have a complete mission that can do the job. Next slide, please. Critical team members, skills lost. Either the people or their capabilities can walk away from the team over such a long time. This is something we're going to have to keep an eye on. We're already putting resources into it, but that cost estimation that Kathy talked about to mitigate this risk is what brought us down to the likelihood of 2. But still, this is one of our top risks. Next slide. Ground communication facilities not adequate. We could go on about this. DSN is gonna, as we've talked about, gonna be challenged out past 150, 200 AU, and importantly, the funding for DSN, the maintenance and the upkeep are all extremely important. Next slide, please. I think we should get down to a 6. Next one, please. Reliability of flight system cannot be acceptably demonstrated. How do you test for 50 years? This is a big challenge. Next slide, please. Risk 8, consumables management model error. If you make a mistake on a 12-year mission that reduces your lifetime by, say, 20% or so, you're not going to cut significantly into the overall mission profile. But if you did it on this mission, you'd lose a whole decade's worth of science operations on your propellant if your propellant budget is off by a significant error. These are things that could have major impacts given the long timeline. Next slide, please. RPS is not capable of supporting a 50-year mission. If the plutonium that shows up on the table to go into the radioisotope power system for us is not as hot, is not as high quality as we planned for, and this is actually a thing. The New Horizons, the plutonium pellets that went into the New Horizons RTG were marginally less hot the day they were installed than the plan had been for, and so the amount of power available to New Horizons was a little bit lower than the expected beginning of life power, and therefore the expected end of life power. And so this is a very real thing that we can't control and RPS can't predict until they get to the moment of actually fueling the RTG. Next slide, please. And ground system is not able to support a 50-year mission. If for whatever reason we get to the point where hardware and software have just not been able to keep up with the decades that flow by, what do we do? However, we believe that the investment that is in our plan to make sure that we have computers and training and software and updates to keep it going in place, then I believe that we'll be able to keep this risk under control. Nevertheless, this is definitely a risk that we have to manage. And next slide. Okay, I know I went kind of fast through that, but I'd be pleased to take any questions about overall risk management. We have a quick question in here from John, and he's corrected his definition of SPDF, the Space Physics Data Facility. Thank you, John. That's not a question for risks. That's okay. 50 years is a long time. 50 years is a long time to maintain any piece of hardware, especially one that you can't go and actually do maintenance on. And it's a long time to keep a team running a program in place. And however, NASA's been running many things for many decades. And I believe that with the experience of the community, we'll be able to make this mission come together like that. All righty, let's take a very short break. At 12 o'clock, we'll be right back here with Susie Dodd from the Voyager program and the Deep Space Network. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in about 5 minutes at 12 noon.